Welcome to our next session in our series on resilience during a pandemic. And this time we're going to be talking about reasoning and critical thinking skills and how that helps you to be resilient during this time. So we're going to look at a couple of different aspects of that. So as usual, what's on for today? So first of all, just gonna quickly run through who I am, and then we'll check in with you guys. Where are you all from? Who are you? And so on, just so we can all get to know each other, especially for all the new people on the call. And then we're going to be looking a little bit at the neuroscience of responding to crises. How does different styles of response result in different kind of responses in the brain itself? Then we're going to be looking at a technique called visualization, which might be a little bit different from the visualization techniques you might have heard about before. And this is a very powerful resilience building technique that's quite unique. So, and after that, we're going to be talking a little bit about dealing with change, especially with all the change that we're experiencing right now. So, first of all, for all the ones that have been joining a few times, I've been hearing this quite a couple of times. So I'm just going to run through this very quickly about who I am. So for all the new people on the call, so basically, I'm someone that's got a big interest in a lot of different areas of how the brain works and how resilience works and how humans function in society and all that. So I've studied a bit of neuroscience, a bit of finance, a bit of organizational psychology, and a couple of other things. And eventually published some research on the neuroscience of resilience. How do we define resilience? What is it? What does it look like in the brain itself? How do we measure it? How do we build it? All that kind of stuff. So also wrote a couple of books around wellness and resilience. The most recent one is called Executive Resilience, which is more about resilience in the workplace and for employees and for leaders. How do we build a culture of resilience? So all of these kind of came together into a company called Driven, which is also the name of our chatbot, which is essentially an app you can download. You can use it and it'll teach you little resilience techniques every day to help you build all these different kind of skills that help you to be resilient and essentially help you make it grow through any kind of challenge that you might face. So all in all, I'm a bit of a resilience expert. I guess that's really what it comes down to. So more importantly, let's just talk about you guys quickly. So a couple of you have already jumped into the chat there and said hello. For the ones that haven't said hello yet, just jump in there. Just let me know, where are you from? What brings you here? Is it more for yourself or for someone else or for a business, anything like that? So we've got Margaret from Cape Town over there. Bill, back, good to see you back. Natalie from Bathurst, great to see you back again. Karen, Suzanne, Adrian. Adrian, good to see you. And Ruth from Toowoomba, great. School counselor, I love it. And Joanne from Maitland. Suzanne, psychotherapist, great. Miranda, clinical psychologist from Northwest Tassie, nice. Middle of the Rona hotspot. Yeah, nice, Miranda. Ronald from Jakarta in Indonesia, fantastic. Getting some global participation. And Karen from Christchurch, Carol from Bunbury. Yeah, cool. All right, yeah, we've got a good bit of variation here. A lot of Australia here this time. I see. Cool. Auckland, Gold Coast, Brisbane. Nice. All right. So we've got a good representation there. So of course, as we go through, you can use that same chat function if you want to ask a question or make some comments or anything like that. I'll be asking you guys some questions as we go too. There is also a question and answer format, which is sometimes a little bit easier for me not to miss something. So you can also use that if you want to ask any questions. And of course, you can ask questions as we go, or afterwards we'll do a Q&A as well if you want to stick around then. So let's talk first about resilience and response. And is resilience really your ability to respond to a crisis and respond effectively? So in here, I've got the first question already. And what do you guys think? Is resilience and your resilience capacity really grounded in how well you can react to unexpected challenges. What do you guys think? Is that really what resilience is about? Thoughts? Bill, yes. Christine, yes. Got a couple of yeses. Jaya, yes. Adrian, partly about framing and interpreting challenges. Yeah. Arwa, also yes. Carol, recovery and maybe more than reaction to. Julian, I don't think it's limited to unexpected changes. Yes. Natalie, yes, absolutely. Well, so a lot of yeses here. So let's explore this idea. So, and if we look at just what's happening with the coronavirus, then it's quite true, because there's so many things that we need to do a whole lot of quick thinking about right now. There's like a whole lot of new problems we need to solve that we might not really have thought about before, and a whole lot of stuff that we're not really prepared for, and we need to quickly adapt to all the different stuff that's happening right now, and especially with all the news and information that's constantly coming out that this is now happening, and there's now this level of lockdown, and things have changed. So Kylie, so just asking there, can we ask people to turn chat onto all attendees? I think it should be on by default, that if you guys chat, that everyone should see it. If not, let me know. Interesting. Yeah. Okay, guys. So I guess when you're chatting, just make sure you are addressing it to all panelists and attendees. There, you'll see there's a little drop-down box right at the bottom, right where you type, and yeah, so that way we can all share in each other's thoughts as we go. Cool. Thanks for that. Awesome. So yeah, just if we're looking at the coronavirus and everything that's happening now, there is so much new stuff that we're unprepared for, and our ability to be resilient right now is very much about how can we effectively respond to this challenge that we're facing now and adapt to all these new things that we might not have considered before. So if we then look at the domain of reasoning, which is really our focus for today. So this is one of the 6 domains of resilience, along with vision, which is about meaning and purpose, composure, which is more about stress management, health, which is your sleep, nutrition, exercise, looking after your physical body, tenacity, which is more about bouncing back, and motivation, and collaboration, which is about your ability to connect and have a strong support network. So reasoning fits in here as the much more cognitive side of things. So, and a big part of reasoning is about anticipating and planning. So this is preparing and being proactive about what might happen and what can we do in advance to try and minimize that impact. So this means there's a lot of creativity and problem solving involved in this domain, because it's really about, hey, this thing could happen. What am I going to do about it? How can I solve this? But then also in the middle of a crisis, how can you quickly solve that problem and have a clear enough mind so that you can figure out what to do and get the right resources? So being resourceful is a really important part of this, because we often need to figure out some kind of novel way to get past this crisis that we're facing. Another interesting thing about this is also about how do we find opportunity in change. So when things are changing, how do we figure out, this is how I can make the most of this change that I find myself in right now. And that's one of the things we'll talk a bit about later. So a lot of what this is about using higher brain function, so more the frontal cortex versus the impulsive brain, which is more emotional and doesn't really think much in the long term. It's not very strategic. Whereas reasoning, it's really about that strategic component which allows us to figure out, here is something I can do that would be really good in the long term and that can be really constructive. So let's have a quick look in the brain. So what's kind of happening when we're talking about this kind of domain of reasoning? And effectively here, what we want to consider is, what's the effect of preparedness when we're preparing for different things that might happen? What's actually happening in the brain? So as we just mentioned, there is the prefrontal cortex, which really is the part of the brain that is very intelligent. It's long-term thinking, creative problem solving, and very strategic. So that's the part of the brain that really underpins this domain of reasoning. Then, of course, there's the limbic brain we just talked about, with the amygdala just over there, which is more about fear and threat detection and short-term thinking, emotional thinking, and it has the power to downregulate, so reduce the activation of the frontal cortex if we feel like we're in danger and we need to go into that kind of fight or flight or freeze response. So what happens when we prepare for something? If we consider ahead of time, here is something that might happen, let me do something about that ahead of time. So here we can look at what's happening in the limbic brain when we're prepared for something versus what happens in the frontal cortex. So if we are prepared for something, then it means there is less amygdala activation. So there's less activation of that limbic brain, which means we feel less panicked, we're less worried, we're less stressed, because essentially when that threat is kind of detected by the limbic brain, and it first does that check, with the rest of the brain and with the frontal cortex to see, should I be worried right now? Is this something that's a danger to me? And then when essentially the frontal cortex comes back and says like, yeah, don't worry, we're prepared for this, we've figured out what to do, then the limbic brain essentially can go like, okay, cool, I don't need to activate, I don't need to feel stressed and panicked right now. So, and then because of that, then we go over to more activation in the frontal cortex, where we've got greater activation there, we can think more clearly, we've got better problem solving skills, because if the frontal cortex has less activation, then it means you can't think clearly, you can't solve problems. And that's why usually when, if you get a little bit stressed in the moment, then it can just become really hard to think. You've got like that brain fog. And if we can avoid that, so if we can avoid that activation of the limbic brain, that is when you get better problem solving skills, because you've got proper blood flow to the frontal cortex, it's working well, you can think clearly, and then you can apply all these other kind of strategies. You can be more resourceful because you can figure out, there's this other thing that's not really connected at all, but I could use that in this way to solve this problem that I'm facing right now. And you can come up with all these kind of creative solutions in the heat of the moment. So the result is you become more confident in a crisis, essentially because you've prepared. So, and if we think about something like a pandemic, so one of the many jobs I had in the past was to create pandemic plans for businesses. So that actually involved me writing out a whole bunch of things about, if a pandemic happens, then you do this, and then you do this, and you'd have this kind of technologies in place so people can work from home and all this kind of stuff. And then we test those plans and actually run scenarios with it and see, what works, what doesn't, so that, if eventually it does happen, then the business is prepared. So which is kind of funny when all this stuff started happening with coronavirus, then it's like, oh, a lot of those plans that I wrote is probably coming out now. So, and that's something that's kind of, is a lot of risk management stuff on the business side, but it also applies to just normal people as well. So these are the kind of scenarios that we would not normally think about, but they are things that can happen. And as we see here, now it has happened. So if we're aware of these kind of scenarios, then we can start thinking about what could we do if this happens. And if we then take some constructive action to put that into place, then when it does eventually happen, we're a lot less stressed, because we know, yeah, we've thought about this. we've come up with strategies. We've already done things ahead of time. So, and I guess, another example from my side is I generally bulk buy stuff, and I've been doing that for about 10 years or so, partly because I'm lazy, but also partly because I know that things like this can happen, and then you get panic buying and things like that, and then it can be hard to get the stuff that you normally want to get. So that way it's it's something that's practical for me. It doesn't really add much more. It's not really any kind of complexity in my life, but it does mean I'm just that little bit more prepared, so that when I see all this panic buying stuff happening, then I don't have to worry that much, because I know I'm kind of set, because I just do this naturally anyways. And it's actually something that I started doing after I saw what happened in Fukushima, and there were some guidelines that Japan gave to their people about, hey, this is kind of how you should do it. Buy a whole bunch of food, and then you eat the stuff over time. The oldest stuff first, so you kind of constantly work through your food stockpile that you just have normally at home. Doesn't have to be a lot, but at least a week or two. So little things like that we could all do if we actually take the time to think about it. So this is kind of one of the big new ideas that we're putting out there about resilience, is that a lot of resilience is what you build in advance. It's not just how you react. And if you look back at answers before, for a lot of people, the idea of resilience is still that it is how well you respond. But if you are more prepared, then you can respond much more effectively to the situations you might face. And that has a real impact on the brain itself, because if you're not prepared for something, the amygdala activates a lot more strongly. That limbic brain activates really strongly, and that can then cause much more traumatic experiences. And if it's traumatic, that means that experience can last for a lot longer. It can be really hard to work through those memories and work through other things that might come out of that, like post-traumatic stress disorder. But on the other hand, if you're more prepared, there's less activation, which means you can bounce back faster, essentially. So, really important concept there is about building resilience in advance. Don't always wait for a crisis to happen. You can learn about things that could happen and then take action ahead of time. So that's why I want to walk you guys through a technique that, from my perspective, is really, really powerful to build resilience in advance. And this is called visualization. Now, this is not the normal visualization you might do where you visualize something happy, like you're holding the Quidditch cup or something like that. This is kind of negative visualization. So visualizing things that might go wrong. So let me just pause there for a second. So Kyle is asking a question. Is it possible to simply believe we are resilient to be resilient? To some extent. So if you really believe you are resilient, it depends then if you actually behave in a resilient way when something goes wrong. Because if that belief is real, because you do actually have those skills, then something happens, then you can respond in a constructive way. But if you have kind of a false belief that you're resilient, but then something happens and then you realize that actually I'm really not coping with this, I don't know what to do, then quickly that belief goes away, and it shakes your concept of and your confidence in yourself, because you're not actually as resilient as you thought. So yeah, it's important to have the confidence that you are resilient, but then also back it up by actual skills. And that's kind of where we go into these kind of techniques like visualization, which is one of those skills that help you identify how resilient are you before something actually happens. So we're essentially visualizing challenges here. Now, as I mentioned, this is a really important skill that is very practical. It's because it results in actual action. It's something that you can kind of very systematically do. It's also an ancient Stoic technique, but I've adapted it a little bit. So if you go into like Marcus Aurelius and the meditation, so a lot of the philosophy that they talk about there is kind of what we see in the concept of visualization, where you're visualizing something that actually goes wrong, and then figuring out what do you do about it. So if done correctly, visualization builds a lot of confidence, and if you do it incorrectly, then you'll just get really panicked. So it's an interesting technique, but the concept is really simple. You visualize a scenario, you figure out, is this going to be really bad? And then you take action. Easy, right? So I'm going to get you guys to actually run through this concept and run through this technique with me. So first of all, let's do step one. So here we want to visualize a scenario. And the idea here is to find scenarios that might have a big impact on your life. Because sometimes you might think of a scenario like, what if I broke one of my favorite plates that I eat off of? And then you think about, you actually then put, kind of put yourself into that scenario. Like if you're feeling like, okay, I'm imagining, and I've got this plate, I really love it, and I turn around and I walk into the table and I accidentally drop the plate on the floor and it smashes all over the place. How would I feel? Like, it would kind of suck, but I would just clean it up and it's not a big deal. So whatever. So if you get that kind of response, like, okay, yeah, actually it's not a big deal, then whatever. We don't really need to worry about it. But if you think about a different scenario where it might be something like, what if I lose my job? And you start thinking through that scenario, and you think like, oh, actually, this could be really bad for me. That's then when we've got to look at and go through it and step further. So because those events that would have a big impact, those are the ones that we actually need to prepare for. And the preparation here is kind of like a practical way that builds resilience, but it also builds the confidence within yourself that, I am prepared for things. And that's part of what, gives you that mentality and that belief in your own resilience. Now, very importantly, this can be stressful. Also, it's supposed to be stressful. That's the whole idea, because you're trying to find what kind of scenarios would actually really affect me mentally and would actually really have an effect on my life. Because if you can find those things, then you're finding areas in your life where you've got some level of vulnerability. And this is not to say that you should not have any kind of vulnerability. It just means that there are things that you need to consider and to keep in mind that there's things that can happen that are potentially very disruptive in our lives, and those are things that we need to do something about. We can't just ignore them, because if you ignore them, that's when you put yourself and your own mental well-being at risk, because there are things that can happen, and if they do happen, then that unexpectedness of that event can then activate your impulsive brain so strongly that it can create traumatic experiences, and that trauma can then take a lot of therapy to actually get past, and it can really set you back in your life. So the more prepared you are, the less your amygdala is going to activate, and the more you can use your frontal cortex to figure out, okay, this has happened. How am I going to solve this problem? How am I going to work through this in a constructive way so that you can grow through any challenge that you might face? So the important thing here is that if you do find this very stressful, then start small. So start with a really small scenario so that you can work up to bigger ones and bigger ones over time. So, and if you think about, small things, and this is kind of where we're going to go into the actual scenarios itself, is you can think about really small things like losing your phone, losing your wallet, and this might then scale up into bigger scenarios over time, such as, what if, I crash my car, or everything is stolen, or I lose a friend just because we have a falling out, or even bigger stuff like, losing a job, losing your, having a breakup with a partner, through to what if someone close to me dies? What if someone gets really sick and I need to take care of them all the time? What if someone I know commits suicide? These are all real things that happen to people all the time. And a lot of these are things that we just avoid thinking about. And the more we avoid it, the more we put ourselves at risk for when these things do happen. Then we're going to be so unprepared that it's just going to be traumatic when they do. So doesn't mean we've got amazing solutions for all of these. So and that's kind of where we're going to step 3, where there's step 2, where there are 3 different things that we can look at about how can we manage these different types of scenarios. So now I want you guys, and I want each of you to come up with something. So I'm gonna personally use losing my phone as a scenario to give you guys some ideas of how do we put this into practice. But for you guys, just come up with something by yourself, and you can write it there in the chat. So see, Kylie has put in there her scenario is that my partner is type 1 diabetic. I'm often fearful of what would happen if he doesn't take better care of himself. What would happen if he were no longer around? We have 3 young children. Yes, see, that is a very realistic scenario. And it is definitely something that you need to think about and you need to prepare for. So Kylie's got her scenario in there. So what do you guys have? If this is kind of new to you, pick something small as well, like losing a phone or a wallet or crashing a car or I don't know, losing all your money on pokies or something like that. So put something in the comments there, and then as we go through, then we can we'll work through the steps. So Suzanne, going to the dentist is very traumatic. No matter how I prepare for going to the dentist, I always end up activating and recovering for the next few weeks. Interesting. Yes. Priscilla, losing her mom. Yeah, big one. Yeah. So you don't have to jump into the really big scenarios just yet. So if you want to do something small, all good. And I see we've got quite a few people here. So Bill Carson being invaded by another country. Hey, could have happened. And that is an interesting one. So there are so many scenarios that we can consider. So we kind of have to consider the likelihood of different scenarios as well. Because if the scenario is so extraordinarily likely, then it means there's less thought and effort that you need to put into that. For example, what if a meteorite wipes out the planet? Very small likelihood, and not much is going to survive anyway, so you probably don't really need to worry about it. So we're kind of interested more in the scenarios that are a little bit more likely that could actually happen, and taking those kind of scenarios gives us a better idea of, these are the things that we should actually spend our time on, and then take appropriate action so that we end up worrying less about them afterwards. So, all right, cool. So Charlene mentions that as well. So does visualizing scenarios possibly lead to rumination, which can seriously exacerbate anxiety? Yes, so exactly. So that's the trick with this kind of visualization exercise, is that it needs to lead to action where you do something about it so that you worry less about it afterwards. Because if you're just constantly worrying about it, then you're not taking action constructively. So that's a very important distinction with visualization, is it's not about just thinking constantly about what if this happens? Oh my God, it's going to be so bad. No, it's about what's going to happen. What can I do about it? Let's do it. And now I don't have to worry about it as much anymore. So yeah, great question, Charlene. Cool. And ta-da-da, losing job, elderly dad, cool. What if I face a trigger for a panic attack? How will I manage the unexpected? Yeah, Julene. Yeah, it's a very relevant question there, a very relevant thing to think about. Yeah, great. All right, cool. So we've got some scenarios there. Now, the next step, so now, especially for you guys that have picked some bigger scenarios. So if the next part of step one is a little bit too hard, then maybe just take it down a notch to something a little bit simpler, so you can kind of work up to it more over time. So because now essentially we want to visualize this as if it's happening now. How would you feel? Like if I'm thinking about my scenario, which is me losing my phone, how would I feel if I suddenly realized that, let's say I was just out on the town, back in the days when we could be out in the town, and I touch my pockets and I realized that I don't have my phone with me. And then straight away I would kind of get that sinking feeling like, oh my God, my phone is gone. And there's so much on my phone that I need. This is bad. Then how would I react? I would probably be quite a bit panicked. I would start to look around all over the place, try to retrace, where was I? Go back to places, see if I can find it. Most likely, if I lost it at some pub or something, then it's probably just gone, because that's the kind of thing that someone would just take, and then they would run off with it. Then I need to think about what will the impact be over the next week and over the next year. So over the next week, I would need to get a new phone. I would need to get a new SIM card. That's probably gonna take a week or something. I don't even know. That's not something I've researched. So then I need to set up the new phone. I need to get all the apps and everything reinstalled. Yeah, I don't know. There's like a whole lot of passwords and things that I need to make sure I know, and all that kind of stuff to get everything logged on. What if there are things on my phone that wasn't backed up? Is there a whole lot of photos and things that I'm losing here, or files that was on my phone that's now gone? That'll probably be the worst part of it if I do lose a whole bunch of photos that I really want. But then in the meantime, I'll be just a whole lot less contactable because I don't have a phone. So that's kind of the first step, because then this is just kind of where it helps me to identify that is this a really big issue. So for the first week, probably, yeah, it's going to be quite a bit of a disruption in my life, I suppose. After a year, what would the impact be? Not really much. I guess after that week, it'll probably be okay. I mean, there'll be a financial impact because I'll need to get a new phone, which is going to cost quite a bit of money. But a year later, I probably wouldn't really remember much about it. So it's got a bit of impact for me, but it's not huge. It's manageable. So yeah, that's my scenario. So what does this mean for your scenario? So yeah, so for Suzanne, for the dentist, can't breathe, cry, feel small. Yeah, yeah, embarrassed in the next few weeks or next week. Recover by nurturing myself. Yeah, that's probably a very realistic view of how that kind of thing would affect you. And for you guys that have mentioned more bigger techniques, probably don't need to think about this too much, because you probably have a good idea of how this would affect you. Yeah, being very concerned about your kids and how you're going to support them. Yeah, exactly. So with that in mind, so now I suppose a question for you guys. So let's just answer this one in the comments. Would the scenario you've chosen have a big impact on your life in the short or long term? Yes or no? What do you guys think? Christine, yeah. Prince Stella, yes. Simone, yes. Kylie, big, short to medium, yep. Suzanne, yes. Christine, yes. Whole lot of yeses. So if you get that idea that it is going to be a yes, yeah, Natalie's is saying, good exercise, got a plan to stay in contact with the extended family, seek support, and take mental health days off for work. Immediate impact, but through resilience will cope, I am sure. Cool. Okay, so now we can look at step 2, which is really about taking action. So now that looks like almost all of you have identified something that will have some kind of a big impact on your life. So that means we need to do something about it. So what can we do? So essentially, so we've done that part where we've identified that we need to do something about it. Now we need to prepare for it. So now we need to find what's the best way to prepare. And here, this is really where the reasoning domain tends to come in, because we need quite a bit of clear thinking. We need to be resourceful. We need our problem-solving skills to figure out what is a constructive way to deal with this potential scenario. And the importance here that I hope is kind of becoming a little bit clear is that when you're thinking about these things and you're thinking through these problems ahead of time, is that it's going to be much easier to think about what can you do now versus actually in the moment when it's happening. And that means you've got more ability to use your frontal cortex and use that smart part of the brain to be able to find good techniques and good ways to deal with this challenge. Now, there are 3 different types of ways that we can deal with the challenges that we might face. So one is to prevent it completely. We can also minimize the likelihood or the impact of the event, or we can accept it. So for those of you who are a little bit more familiar with risk management techniques, you might recognize some of these things. So, and they're very applicable here in this kind of visualization exercise, because it'll give us some ideas of what can we actually do about this. So let's take a look at the first one, prevention. Now, is there some way you can completely avoid something from happening? This scenario that you're imagining, is there some way you can completely avoid it? So some examples, I can prevent needing a root canal by, proper care and regular dental checkups, or I suppose in Suzanne's idea or scenario, how can we avoid going to the dentist completely? Well, I guess if you take really good care of your teeth, it can avoid needing to go to a dentist that often. You can at least reduce the amount of times you need to go. Could be an idea. And there are other things here that we can do as well. Like, let's say, we're really worried about ending up in a car accident. Well, we can avoid ending up in a car accident by not driving. Oh, how can I get in a car accident if I don't drive? Well, yeah, that's probably not entirely useful. I mean, if I think about my scenario, how can I avoid losing my phone? Well, I can totally prevent losing my phone if I don't have a phone in the first place. Ha! Is that a good idea though? Maybe not. So this is something that's really important, that it's not always optimal to totally prevent something from happening. Sometimes, the implementing the strategy of prevention might be worse than the actual event itself. So for me to not have a phone at all is probably going to be worse than potentially losing my phone somewhere along the way. So this is kind of one of the first parts where we stop and just think, is prevention a good strategy? Think about your scenario. Can you prevent your scenario from happening? If so, how? And prevention is definitely not something that applies to everything. So let's hear it from you guys with the scenarios you've thought about so far. Can you prevent the scenario that you have in mind? Kylie, I use a lot of things, close wallet keys, prevention strategies, ways to slow down, reduce the amount of things I was doing in a day. So I wasn't always rushing. Priscilla, no. Natalie, no. Circle of life stuff, yes. Kylie, yeah, can't prevent someone from dying. It's true. That's simply how it is. Okay, so it looks like generally these are no so far. So, so prevention mostly do not apply to the scenarios we have here, but hey, it's one that that you can keep in mind. Like other places where this could apply as well is like if you're really worried about the kind of things you tend to say when you're drunk, then you can prevent that by not getting drunk in the first place. So sometimes these can be more practical things that you can apply, and just reducing that, the chances something like that would happen. But who knows? All right, cool, Christine. All right, cool. So let's look at the next one, minimization. This one is much more likely to be able to be applied in some kind of way. And this is generally the strategy that you would use. And there are two parts to it. So first of all, can you minimize the impact of something happening? So impact here, if I think about my phone, I can make sure that everything on my phone is properly backed up, that I know everything that's on the phone. I can keep my old phone so that, if I do lose my main phone, I do have another phone to go back to. I don't have to, buy a new one straight away. And it means I can get back up and running faster. It means I just need to wait for the new SIM card, for example. So that, all those little things that I can do reduces the impact of when I do lose my phone. And that means that if in that kind of case, like if I've done that preparation and I lose my phone, I'm not going to be so panicked because I know that, I've thought about this. Yeah, I know it's all backed up. It's a pain that I've lost it, but it's okay. Same with my wallet. So like one of the things that I've done is I've cataloged all the things that are in my wallet. What are all the cards and everything like that? What are the phone numbers of all the cards that I need to cancel and all that kind of stuff, so that if I do lose my wallet, I know what to do and I know how to cancel everything, and I've got all the details and I'm prepared. So just having done that preparation, it just reduces that anxiety of if something does happen, then it's okay, I'll be fine. So that's the impact side. Then there's also the likelihood side. So likelihood here is what's the percentage chance that this might happen? Like if I go at 100 times, what's the percentage likelihood that I might lose it? Like, is it 1%? So maybe one time out of 100, I might actually lose my phone. Hopefully it's not that high. Well, given that I haven't lost my phone, I think it's probably less than that. So how can you reduce the likelihood of something happen? So if I'm thinking about losing my phone, so there are again some practical strategies I can do there. So like if I get up from if I'm walking away somewhere, I can make sure that I always have my phone with me. I can also just do a quick tap on my pants to make sure that my phone is there, my wallet's there, my keys are there. Cool, I'm good to go. Even if I'm just going to the bathroom for a minute, then I still do that, so I still know it's all there and it's not going to get swiped off the table or something like that while I'm away. So little practical strategies that you can put in place. And then of course, if you like scale this up towards the really big things, like some of you are thinking about losing people that are close to you, the likelihood side, like if you're thinking about diabetes here, of course, as Kylie's pointed out, there it becomes more about how well you take care of yourself, how well your partner takes care of themselves. That can affect the likelihood of something something happening to them. On the impact side, there again, it might be around what kind of precautions can you put in place, and these are things that are not fun to think about when you think about life insurance and stuff like that, where it's much more of the really harsh reality of the kind of stuff that might happen in life. And and those are just the things that we need to think about, that how can we reduce the likelihood and the impact of this so that we're more prepared for when this does happen. So if we think about more scenarios, like, we've got lots of income protection for losing jobs. There's of course all types of insurance for like theft and roadside support services for if you happen to break down, and even with relationships. So this is something that's important, is if you have a significant other, how often do you actually do like really honest check-ins with each other about how are we doing? Because those, just doing that kind of the preventative stuff can help to identify issues earlier before they become so big that they result in a breakup, because it's just kind of festers and it grows over time. So, and this can take quite a bit of introspection, quite a bit of kind of confidence and trust. But the earlier you can do these kind of things and the more honest you can be, the more it can kind of strengthen a relationship, rather than it kind of eroding over time because you're not talking about things, or because you're avoiding the potential of something that might happen. Suzanne has put in a comment there. So this process sounds practical for many things using the process you're talking about. However, for some things where trauma has been an early experience and influenced how you do life, I am not sure this would work, maybe over time. So this is not a technique to resolve trauma. Trauma is something that you go to a psychologist for. Like if it's something that's really set into the brain, then this technique is not going to be your friend. This technique is more for the broader population, for everyone else. And it's kind of like exposing yourself. So it's kind of like exposure therapy in a way to things that might happen, so you can figure out does this have the potential to cause me trauma in the future? If so, let's do something about it now. But if it's something that's already happened and it's already caused trauma, then that's something that needs to be worked through in using different techniques. So yes, good question. And it's good to remember these kind of things, because this is where resilience is not always just an easy thing. But it's also not something that we should jump into quickly if there are unresolved things that need to be worked through. Great. So let's look into minimization for your specific scenario. How can you potentially minimize the impact or the likelihood? What are your thoughts? So, Natalie, to minimize the impact, stay in the moment in gratitude for what we've had. Likelihood of not traveling is great while COVID-19 is going on. And yes, my dad and I often have check-ins, which is comforting. So yeah, that's a really good point. When you've got those kind of scenarios where you might lose someone because of COVID-19, one of the things you can do there is simply by spending more time with them, so that if something does happen with them, then at least you're not going to regret spending time with them when you had the time. Because thinking about this kind of scenario and making it real for yourself that, yeah, this is something that could happen. I could lose this person. Then it means that, hey, I should really spend time with them. Because like if you think about that happening, like what if it happened right now? And you feel like, oh, there's so many things I've wanted to say, and there's so many things I wanted to do with them that I haven't done, then that is the indication for you that maybe I should actually go and do those things with them. Maybe I should tell them these things that I've really wanted to say, and then just kind of giving you that impetus to actually follow through with that, so that if something did happen, then you feel a lot calmer about it, because you know that, I'm glad I spent the time with them that I did. I'm glad I said the things that I said. So yeah, very important. Nadia, nothing is left unsaid. Good. Priscilla, for me, I love my mom and we enjoy our time together. Great. Yeah, Natalie, not being able to travel, it worries me. Hey, video calls, all we have right now. Hey, Karen, wait for the market to change. Borders are open and talk to mom in England regularly via Zoom. Great. Kylie, get a will. Very practical. And yes, that's the kind of stuff that often we need to do with these things is especially in Australia where deceased estates are not handled as you would imagine, and it's not like it just goes to your partner. So yeah, being prepared for those kind of things is important. And Julian, for me, it's about learning strategies regarding the impact. I cannot control the likelihood without becoming a hermit. Yes, that's exactly right. It's not always a good idea to just try and prevent something or trying to minimize the chance of something by avoiding life. That's not the idea. So very true. Having a plan to act reasonably when the fight or flight response kicks in is key. Yes. Kylie, save money. Good idea. Do it. Cool. Then we get to the third strategy, which is acceptance. So this one is much more about mental preparation. Like, how can you accept the event in case it does happen? So here we're talking about that we really can't control everything. So some potential outcomes, all we really can do is to accept that, yeah, this is something that might happen. And yeah, when it happens, it's gonna hurt like hell. It's gonna suck. But that's life. Like I said earlier, circle of life stuff. Hey. And this also applies to strategies where you might try and minimize the likelihood or impact of something, is that you don't have to pick just one of these three strategies. You can pick a couple of them together. So you can both minimize the potential that something might happen and also then accept the likelihood that if it does happen, I'll be okay. I'll get through it. I'll figure it out. I'll get back on track. And that way you can kind of combine that in it, and that combination just adds more and more confidence into your ability to manage whatever situation comes up. So, question again for you guys: can you accept the outcome? How can you accept it? Kylie, simple answer: yes. Yeah, and I suppose especially for your situation, Kylie, where it is something that is like that, where it's a very real possibility that you kind of have to just accept that possibility that this is something that can happen. Priscilla, no. Yes, that's definitely something to think about then, because these are things that can happen. We can't necessarily fight against life and the course of life. So yeah, so Priscilla, then it's a question of you choosing not to accept that possibility that something like that can happen. What would that mean for you if it does happen? What would it mean for those close to you or for those who depend on you? Is that fair for them, for you to kind of shut down, or would you still work through it in some kind of way? Something to think about. Bill, the acceptance needs to be frequent, and it's about managing our expectations. Yeah, which is very true. This is really about setting our own expectations of what could happen. And because if we have the right kind of expectations and then something happens which is then in line with our expectations, even if that expectation is quite harsh, then it still has much less of an impact on the limbic brain, because the limbic brain would be checking with the rest of the brain, is like, is this supposed to happen? Is this really it? Then the brain would go like, yeah, no, this is actually how life is. And then it goes, oh, okay, well, this sucks, but it's not trauma. So yeah, great point. So there essentially we get to the outcome of the visualization exercise is that the more you do this, the more prepared you become for any kind of scenario. So and hopefully you'll start smaller and then work up over time. And as you do that, you'll also become more confident, even for events that you didn't plan for. So you become more calm in a crisis because you're becoming more confident in your ability to solve any kind of problem. Because as you kind of solve different types of problems in your head, as you take different types of actions, especially around the bigger things in life, then you are essentially practicing that ability of yours to manage crises. And this is the same thing that businesses do as well. They've got these crisis management exercises where they throw different scenarios at them to see, like, how are you going to deal with this? What are you going to deal with that? And then as you practice that, then people become more able and calmer in those kind of situations, and you just become more able to figure out, okay, this is the things that are important. This is what's important to me. These are my expectations, and yeah, I can manage this, even if though this is something a bit new. It's still kind of very similar to other things that I've done before, and therefore you've got that confidence to deal with it. So the key out of all of this is you take constructive action, so you worry less, because you're not ignoring problems that might happen. So as we said before, it's not about worrying more and more over time and ruminating. So ruminating is where you're just constantly thinking about something, but without really taking constructive action. So here, you're visualizing a scenario, you're taking action, and afterwards there's less to worry about, so you can worry less overall. So, and one of the things that visualization then allows us to do as well is to see more opportunity in when we are facing changes. So, because this is one of the things as well that we should have in our expectations, is that there's always change, but really there is always opportunity in change as well. And if we think about something like losing a job, for example, yeah, that's something that's very likely. A lot of people have lost their jobs now just because of the coronavirus and the impact of the economy. So what does that mean? That means that now, essentially there are some opportunities to do things differently, but it's important also here to think about that possibility ahead of time that I could lose my job. So therefore, if we think about those visualization exercises, can we prevent it? It's a bit hard. Can we minimize the likelihood or the impact of it? Yes, there are income protection and those kind of things. And then actually, if we think about it more, if we go back to the prevention side, well, what if I learn more about the business and learn more about the changes that we might go through? What if I position myself differently in the company, learn different skills so I'm more useful in different areas so that I can move around? What if I could even instigate the change in the first place? Because how could you be surprised by change if you're the instigator of the change in the first place, right? So it's those kind of strategies that we can start to apply if we're thinking about, if we're using this visualization type of exercise ahead of time, and we can start to take action ahead of time. But really, to be able to find those kind of opportunities and change, we need clear goals and a sense of purpose. That vision domain of resilience kind of gives us that, which interacts with our ability to stay calm in a crisis, because if we can stay calm, we can reduce the activation of the impulsive brain. Means we can get more activation of the reasoning domain of the frontal cortex, which then gives us that ability to think through different scenarios. How can I position myself in a company so that if something does happen, I can still have a job, or those kind of things, and be able to make the most of change. So, and even now, if we think about all the stuff happening with COVID, it's a good chance to build some new skills. There's a lot of online courses and things we can do, things we can learn. Even like this that we're doing here, learning more about resilience is really important, which gives us the ability to work on ourselves. There's a lot of books that need to be read. A lot of work on things like discipline and self-motivation. learning about the world and coming changes, so you can position yourself better for the future, so that you're in a stronger position as you go out of this kind of lockdown mode and go back into the workplace, so you can adapt more readily. So there's always these kind of opportunities, and it just kind of takes quite a bit more searching often for when we find ourselves in these kind of scenarios. So and here a message, of course, is that all these resilience domains interact with each other. So the stronger you are across all these 6 domains, the more they support each other to help you to achieve your sense of purpose and do the things that are meaningful to you. So, quick last discussion question here is, what opportunities do you see in how the world is changing right now? What can you work on to grow through this experience? And even if you think about your visualization scenario that you went through, what kind of opportunities are there that like things that you could do right now? What do you guys think? Kylie, amazing opportunity to just be with your kids. Yeah, it's great. Spend time with them. And it's true, is once life goes a bit back to normal, then it's probably going to be the opposite, where we're going to be so far removed from each other that we'll see a lot less. And we're going to be just avoid being at home at all. Learning to slow down and focus on what's really important. Our relationships, very true. Ronald, opportunity to refocus my life. Yep, great. Simone, time to face my mother's mortality realistically. Yeah. Because Simone, when you do that, then, like we were saying before, it gives you that opportunity to just kind of let go of the old, fights and things you might have had and the old feelings, and just focus on, hey, this is someone that does mean a lot to me. So let's just enjoy having time together while we have it. Adrian, reevaluating what is important. Reading, great. Natalie, refocus on vision, what's really important. Perfect. Suzanne, is there an opportunity to appreciate who I am and how I value myself? Having gratitude for my family. Yes, great. And Christine, planet is recovering from negative effect of humans, tends to find ways to live more harmoniously with the planet. Yeah, it's really interesting seeing all this effect that it has now that people aren't all over the place. It's really eye-opening in a way. Priscilla, speaking with professionals about your fear. Yes, very good idea. Like if it causes that much angst, then it's probably a good idea. I've got to say as well, like the dentist that I have now is the first time in my life that I actually enjoy going to the dentist, because they're so bloody good. I've referred so many people to them. If you're in Sydney, let me know. They're awesome. And Andrea, ways to take better care of myself and the world around me, take care of all the things that I enjoy. And that is important. Great. Kylie, catching up with Baz. Oh, why do you have to say such dirty words? Karen, use this opportunity to learn more about who I am and where I'm going. And that is home to England to be with the parents. Great. Jolene, learning, using Driven app. Yeah, great. Yeah, and that's a good point as well, because one of the things that we do in the Driven app itself is going to do more of a step-by-step approach for that visualization exercise. And it's something that I've used quite a bit as well. And there's like a whole bunch of example scenarios that we go through as well, where if you kind of go through all those different scenarios and you take action across all of them, then it just gives you a really good baseline proactive resilience in your life. So that's something that you can get in the app itself. So you can find this in the App Store. I'll just show you a little bit about all the other stuff in it. So one of the skills here is actually, visualization. Yeah, I just so happened to be the top one. So these kind of activities, we explain the concept of visualization in more detail, and then have a bunch of exercises that you can go through to go through all those different options of, identifying the impact to you, and then what can you do about it, and then putting those action plans in place. So nice thing about this as well is you can chat to it anytime. If you're not feeling so great, you need some help to work through something that might have happened. And here it can redirect you into different types of exercises using some natural language and artificial intelligence. And you can track how you're doing over time. There's a resilience test as well, so you can see what are your strengths, where do you have capacity to improve, and there's a whole bunch of skills and things that it goes through. So all these different workshops that we're going through are really talking about skills that are in the Driven app, and we're just kind of exploring the surface of the much broader resilience course that's in the app itself. So a lot of quick techniques and things like that you can use in the moment itself. And we see, when people use this, we see around a 25% improvement in resilience, and that really protects against things like depression, anxiety. So it's just a really easy way to start to build resilience every day through these short 5-minute activities. So if you want to check it out, you can get a free demo. Just get the Driven Resilience app in the App Store, and yeah, try it out. It's good fun. I use it myself as well, so highly recommend it. In the meantime, if you do want to chat more, you can come along to our Reddit group on r/driven. You can also follow us on Instagram @driven, and just get in touch there. Always love to talk to people. And of course, next week we'll be doing our health session, where we're going to be talking about sleep, nutrition, exercise. How do you look after your physical health, and how does that affect the brain, all that kind of stuff. Why is health really important for resilience? So come along for that one, and that'll be at the same time next week. And for now, we'll do a Q&A. So if anyone still has any questions, you are welcome to ask away. From my side, if you would like to drop off, it's fantastic to have you all here. But yeah, I'll stick around. I think Kylie asked a question here. Is acceptance the same as being able to trust myself that I will be able to handle it? To some extent. So a big part of that is the expectation to be able to say that, yeah, I recognize that this thing might happen, that this is a realistic thing that happens in life. And then the trust in yourself to be able to handle that is kind of like the next step beyond that, to say that, yeah, this could happen. And if it does happen, I will be able to deal with it, and having that kind of confidence in your resilience. So, yeah. All right, cool. So Bill, thanks. Adrian, thanks. And everyone else, thank you very much for coming along. It's always awesome to see you guys here. And Natalie, oh, thank you. Step it up. Yeah, great. Natalie, Andrea, thank you. Simone, thanks as well. Hope to see you all next week. Cool. Any other questions? Talk to me. I've got nothing better to do. Charlene, Christine, thank you. Great presentation. My pleasure. It's always fun having a chat with you guys. And I'm impressed that you guys picked some really tough scenarios. I was imagining you would go with a lot simpler things. So yeah, and those really are the things that we all need to deal with. All right, cool. I think we can end it there unless there's any other questions. So thank you very much for joining along with this session, and hope to see you guys next week, and have a fantastic week. Stay resilient. Good night.